Thank you for joining me, and I'm so excited to have a chance to talk with you and learn more about your story and just understand a little bit more about your experience with Lyme disease and what it's done for you. So,
Okay.
yeah, again, thank you for taking the time to do this with me. If you don't mind, we'll just start at the beginning. If you could just tell me a little bit about yourself and your experience with Lyme disease, please.
Okay, so I'm 67 years old currently, and I caught Lyme disease about 10 years ago. Should I just tell the story?
If you don't mind, yes, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Well, it was Memorial Day, and I was at a picnic, and I think that's when I got it. I ventured off from the picnic, and I was just kind of lying down in a grass field, and I think it was maybe a week after that I started to get some back pain or like a muscle pull in my upper back that wouldn't go away. So I went to my family doctor, and he thought it was just a muscle pull, and voila, it basically did nothing. And so I guess a few days after that, I started to feel pretty tired, pretty listless, general malaise. And so my wife, who is a nurse practitioner, took me to the emergency room. And after a series of tests, they found out I had Lyme disease, and I had about a 4-day hospital stay. And
Oof.
after the 4-day hospital stay, where they ran all kinds of tests, I went home, and then I proceeded to, I guess they put me on some kind of antibiotics, if I remember, and I missed the whole month of work. I was out of work for a month with just extreme tiredness. Just couldn't bring myself to do anything. But now, since in the last 10 years, once that cleared up, I really didn't notice any after effects, except that I have joint pain, and I don't know if I can attribute that to Lyme disease or what, but I do have ongoing pain in my joints.
Okay.
And that's basically my Lyme disease story.
Well, that's a pretty wild one, and going to the hospital.
Pardon?
They're all different, and that's why I like doing this, is because everybody has a little bit of a different experience.
Okay.
Some people catch it right away, in the sense, or like, it sounds like you were debilitated almost overnight with sickness, so it was a lot more clear, like something was truly happening. So in a sense, like, I'm kind of glad for you that it went that way. But to go to the hospital, like, you must have been very sick, and I'm glad that they were able to recognize what it was. Have you been tested for Lyme since at all?
No, I haven't.
I was just curious if that had come about, just to maybe kind of pinpoint the joint pain a little bit better. And then, did you have any co-infections at all, or you don't necessarily recall? It was just more the Lyme disease category.
I don't recall really, but I know that we never did find any kind of tick bite.
Okay.
So I don't know where I was bit.
That's what I wondered. Did you get a bullseye rash or anything like that?
No, we never found anything like that.
Okay.
Or if it did, it was in a place on my body that I could not see, And, by the time I went into the hospital, it may have disappeared.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in all reality, only 35% of people get that bullseye rash, approximately 35%.
Okay.
So, I just always am curious because many times people have no idea when they got bit. Like maybe you have sort of an inkling of when that moment of opportunity was there, possibly. But that's the trouble.
Well,
Go ahead.
is it possible that, because I did have a bullseye type bite, but that was years, that was probably in the early 90s, where I did have a bite that was a bullseye, and I don't know, could I have contacted it then, and it lays dormant in your body for 20 years? Is that possible?
Well, you asked some very good questions. In my humble opinion, yes, I do think that's very possible. I also think about wondering, and I don't know if there's really a way for them to prove this, that's the problem, but like possibly we get bit so many times and then it's just like so much that it tips the scale more towards an infection then. I don't know, because they're so small, and you don't feel them bite. They secrete a numbing agent, so you really never know when they're attaching themselves to you. And I mean, I had personally, like, I got bit when I was 20, and I didn't really feel symptoms until I was 30. But when I was 30-ish, I don't really remember being bit by a tick on that specific time. But I had other tick bites in that period. And then I had a really stressful duration in my 20s too, that I think kind of was attributes to me getting so sick. But I wonder sometimes, like, did it lay dormant and then all that stress triggered it? I don't know if you can recall what was happening in your life 10 years ago. Were you feeling like more in a stressful time of your life? Do you remember? Or
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
No, not at all.
Good, because that's something else too that when I talk to some people, they have like an emotional trigger, something, some heavy trauma, or somebody passes away or something like this that can trigger the symptoms. So
no, I'd have to say that my life has been very unstressful.
We should hang out some then. Maybe I can take some lessons from you. I practice balancing less stressful.
Well, we do have I think we do have the same birthday.
Oh, February 5th?
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for
Good
recalling.
Aquarius.
That's right. That's right. We're the best kind, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Slightly biased, but well, I'm glad that you were able to heal relatively quickly and unscathed. That is something else that for my listeners, they typically say if you get treatment right away, 70% of people will go on and not really have any residual problems, although maybe you have some lingering joint pain.
Right. Have you heard that other people have joint pain?
Yeah, and I've read a lot of studies where they will show that the Lyme is supposedly gone or in remission, but it's still found in cartilage and people's eyeballs and their brain. And the spirochete is just very smart. It's a good little shapeshifter, and it does burrow into those parts of our body. And so sometimes that would make sense to me that would be an area that would still possibly be affected.
And have you heard, like I told you, like for literally 4 weeks, a little over 4 weeks, the extreme tiredness, not being able to do anything. Have you heard that symptom before?
Oh, yes, I lived that symptom. Yeah, that's when they say like typical like normal early onset will be exactly what you described: fatigue, malaise, like maybe like a flu type of sickness, brain fog, joint pain. And I'm curious about the pain that you had in your back. And wondering.
Yeah, it was in the upper back. It was more like just thought I had pulled a muscle. It just appeared out of nowhere.
Yeah, I'm
and
just
that's something else I wanted to say also. So to me, and I don't know if this is possible, but maybe when a patient, like, and I can't blame the doctor for misdiagnosing me. He had no idea, but I'm just wondering if people show up at doctor's offices with some mysterious symptoms, if they shouldn't do the Lyme disease test on the patient.
Oh boy.
right away.
You should run for president, I think. If everyone just had that attitude, I completely agree with you. And especially in Pennsylvania, or I mean, really anywhere by now, ticks have been found on all 7 continents. And I think part of the trouble is it would be fantastic, I think, to do it as part of a routine screening on a yearly basis, right? Because estimates nowadays say 400 to 600,000 people a year are infected with Lyme disease. The test that we have right now is terrible. It's 50 to 65% accurate, the standard 2-tier testing, the Western Blot and the ELISA test. And that's what doctors, unfortunately, and their patients are hanging their hat on as hope for something to heal or to tell them whether they've got the sickness or not. And it's not serving us well at all. So that's a huge problem, and people really need to be made aware of that. So you got very lucky. Ultimately, you did test positive. I feel the same. Like, I got so lucky that I tested positive. But there's a lot of controversy around that too. And the way I struggle sometimes to explain this well, but the CDC requires you to have 5 specific bands that you test positive to have 100% certainty that you have come into contact with Lyme disease or that you have contracted. But in essence, there's 300 types of Lyme worldwide, really about 100 in the United States. And so if they're only making you test positive to 5 bands, what about the other 95 or the remaining 295 that maybe people's are world travelers? Maybe they came into contact with it somewhere else in the world, And so I just think that that's a really big problem. And they've acknowledged this. Like, they recognize that doctors should treat more on a patient's symptoms than if they are testing positive those 5 specific bands. But that gets hard for people, because then their doctor will see the CDC's recommendation to say they don't have it because they don't have those 5 bands, but they do. My question is, how do you have anything showing in you with Lyme disease if you've not come into contact with it? But also, with having gotten a bullseye, that you don't even need to get blood work. That's 100% confirmation that you have been infected with Lyme. But the thing is, it's like, the thing is that not all people are going to show symptoms, right? We have underlying conditions, underlying, just people are all different in how we respond to things and process things, and our body handles infection. And so some people might get sick, some people might not. And like my cousin, one of my cousins was like, oh, I had a bullseye rash, I wanted to fall over. And they didn't seem that concerned about it. I'm like, because I know that definitely means that she has Lyme in her body, but she doesn't seem to really have any symptoms. So great. I hope it stays that way for her.
Right.
But I just think there's a lot of. What's that?
Do you know when they first started to recognize that there is a thing, the Lyme disease, when it first started?
Well, that's another good question. So I know in the late 70s is really when it came to head in Lyme, Connecticut. So there were a group of children that all came down with very similar symptoms. And I believe it was actually a mother that had done a lot of research and found out that there was a lot of them having the same subset of symptoms and was able to then get some attention, and they diagnosed that then as Lyme. But
Okay.
I also
So-
have heard things where they said back in like, Neanderthal times, they had Lyme in some of the bodies that they found frozen in the Alps. So
Oh,
it's evidently been around for a very long time. I think it's just really
okay.
exploded a lot in our environment in the last 50, 40 years, because of the fact that the environment maybe is changing a little bit. Maybe there's that thing called global warming going on. Nobody's really certain if that exists or not, but I can see that the tick band, it usually was more around the Pennsylvania, like not just Pennsylvania, but like that latitude of the earth, and then
Right.
expanding up more north and south, and it's just going everywhere now. So I think with the the
Right.
warm temperatures, they're able to expand more up into Canada. My Canadian coworkers have been sharing stories with me about ticks, and there was 3 tick bites that my one coworker told me about in his neighbor's group in less than a week. And I was like, oh, good God. I mean, that they're everywhere. that's not good.
Right.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate that
Well,
it's become so much more rampant.
yes, there's okay. So there's probably many people walking around that don't even know they have it.
Yes. And that's something else I've talked about. Oh, go ahead.
I thought I had read years ago that, and this might sound crazy, but that somehow the military and the government were involved in this. Did you hear anything like that?
I mean, I've certainly heard things like this. I do exist in this space, and yes, there has been a lot of thought that potentially that could have some involvement. I know there's some good books out about that, and Chris Smith, I think, was trying to push really hard to get them to release any information that they had about it, and they never actually were able to get those records opened and released. I've been told that some tick-borne illness, not Lyme specifically, but one of the variations that ticks can carry, has a patent with the U.S. military, but I don't know for sure myself. Again, these are just things that I've heard, and I have thought about it though. Like if they are thinking about, I don't like to go too deep into this, but like if they want something to control people, to make people like a controllable population, I think of it as it turned me into a living, breathing zombie, right? Like I was too tired, dumb, and like I couldn't process thoughts, didn't care. And so we laugh, but like I lived in that space for 7 years it took to get a diagnosis, and it truly turned me into a shell of a human. I struggled very much just to function and to live and to breathe and to eat, to shower, to take care of myself. I would cry a lot. It just really didn't do me any favors as a human. And I have thought about that. Like, well, you don't really need guns and bombs. You can just drop a bunch of ticks on people, and truly, we'll be just too dumb and stupid to care. But who knows? Again, I have those thoughts. But I try not to focus too much on that because it can make me angry. And that's not serving me well. It's not helping me to heal or get better. And so I choose to think about more positive things.
Well, it looks like you're doing well now because all your Facebook posts are really ultra positive, and it looks like you're doing really well.
Thank you. It's been I think in the end, actually, Liz, it's been a very beautiful journey to experience, although it was very hard to walk it sometimes. Again, 7 years of not knowing what was wrong with me was, I think almost made me insane, just because doctors kept telling me that there was nothing wrong with me. And I just thought God made me as a broken human. That was the only ultimate conclusion I could come up with, since there was medically nothing wrong with me.
Right.
But, you know, in the end, it's like, I'm really grateful because I've adopted a lot better health habits, self-love, attention to my needs and what's going on within my being. And I come to really appreciate the value of inner peace and what that can do for people and their health. And it's been fun in a sense too. Like, I've gotten to meet a lot of people, and my world has been, you know, broadly expanded through this whole process. But I still wish it on my own worst enemy, no matter how beautiful I think it was in the end, because it was a really hard place to be for a long time. And that's really what I want to do, is share stories like ours, so that people hear the different variations of what can happen to someone when coming into contact with ticks and Lyme disease. Again, some people,
talking to you, it sounds like it's all over the place. It could be manifest in many different ways for many different people, right?
Yes. And like, I feel in a sense like I was lucky because I could still get up and work, although it was really hard. But some people are put into wheelchairs, some people die. Let's not forget about that option, unfortunately. I've known people who have died, which is heartbreaking, and it will make me cry if I think of them, because, you know, they were friends and loved ones, and they're no longer here.
Right.
And so I think people sometimes have a misconception that, oh, you know, you just take a little bit of antibiotics and I'll be better. Whereas there is the other side of that, where it's like, no, I mean, I took antibiotics for 2.5 years in conjunction with baggie-fulls of supplements and all kinds of energy work. I've done my whole life.
That's another thing I wanted to say. So I missed a month of work, and the reaction I was getting from coworkers were like, "There's nothing wrong with you. Why would you miss a month of work?"
Yes.
I got that reaction a lot, because you don't look sick, but you can't do anything.
Your experience of it is very accurate in what a lot of people experience, and for sometimes very longer durations. And that's one of the hardest things that we struggle with, is that it is an invisible illness, right? And people, like, if you have cancer, it's like, oh, okay, everybody like huddles up around you, drops off food, fundraisers, flowers, this, that, you know, the next thing. Whereas if you have Lyme disease, it's like, you look fine, like, let's go do something. And meanwhile, you're like dying on the inside.
Really, it's like the attitude is like, what's the big deal?
Correct.
You don't look sick. But it was not a good time.
No, it's not. And again, that's what I'm grateful that people like you are willing to talk about it, and that you're asking these questions, that you've thought about this. You know, it's very important, again, for people just to understand that sometimes it's not a simple fix. And then there's a lot of other sicknesses, unfortunately, that ticks carry. And so one of the most recent studies I saw done in Pennsylvania, they tested close to 20,000 ticks, and 50% of them had one or more tick-borne infections. So those aren't very good odds if you're a resident of Pennsylvania and you come into contact with ticks, of not contracting something. But there's newer sicknesses like Powassan virus or the alpha-gal allergy. Like, Powassan virus can give you like a encephalitis of your brain, and can cause hemorrhagic fever. And then the alpha-gal can make you have an allergy to red meat for the rest of your life. And so there's these other things that, like, they're even stranger and harder to diagnose. And so that becomes more challenging too, when we throw in these other things that can affect people.
Yeah, I kind of wish I had an allergy to red meat.
Don't say that.
No, I probably eat too much of it.
Well, it's something that you're aware of, then that you can slowly start to shift and make different choices and changes for. I've actually been doing something similar myself and moving away from it as much as I have been eating it. Tastes good, but it's definitely not the best for us.
Right.
And then, so having gone through what you've gone through, would you have any words of advice for people, or any thoughts like to help get better, or to help to acknowledge what happened to their bodies or something like this?
Yeah. My word of advice is, and we talked about this a while ago, is if you have any of the symptoms of Lyme disease, get to your doctor and get tested. Does that make sense?
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
And I think
And
would. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I think there's maybe the duties of your doctor is like, and maybe insurance companies have a lot to do with this also, but God, let's rule out Lyme disease. Let's rule that out.
Correct.
You go to the doctor and you're not feeling well, and can we just try to rule out Lyme disease, and it might help you? I don't know. Do you know if they're doing any research on, because I still carry that, right?
That's another good question, and one that I don't think that there's a specific answer for. Some people say it goes into remission. Some people say people are cured. I don't show any Lyme in my body any longer, but is it still in there, burrowed far deep into the recesses of my being? I don't know.
Right. And so, how do they test for that? Is that through blood work?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, they're working on some different types of technology. I talked to actually one of my friends, her sister is developing some types of wearable devices, which you put on, and I think you wear it for a week and it collects. Maybe it was RNA. I forget. That's not my specialty, but it sounds like a fantastic idea because it would be an accurate test, right? And a quick and easy thing that people can just wear and then take off and mail in, and then they can get the sample that way. But it's a lot more accurate than what they're doing now. So there's a lot of good things happening. There's a lot of people who have been putting massive efforts into trying to figure out different ways to detect it more effectively. Like I said to you earlier, the standard 2-tier test is a good place to start, I guess, because it's going to be covered by insurance. But if it comes back as a negative, some people then will think, like I said, they don't realize, like, then that doesn't mean they still don't have it. That just means they're not testing positive to those tests. Then you can pay out of pocket and get more specialized testing done, where there's a lab called IGeneX. It's IGENEX.com. That has much more specialized testing facility, and they can do the full tick-borne panel test, but it usually costs maybe, I don't know, $500-600 if I remember correctly. But if I was somebody who couldn't figure out what was going on with me and I had done that test, I would still want to pay for that so that I could rule it out completely and know with certainty that I don't. But yeah, it would be nice if they could develop a little bit more of an accurate test. If I understand correctly too, that technology for the ELISA and Western Blot has not changed in 40 some years. So you would like to think that we could come up with something a little bit better in that time period, but alas, these are what we have to work with for right now. And, you know, that's another part of the rub is, like, it's very expensive to treat Lyme disease when it's gone more long-term or chronically. In the state of Pennsylvania at this time, insurance does not have to pay for treatment of Lyme disease. And sometimes when it is a little bit of a longer term case, it takes a lot more effort, and it's not just a simple, again, an antibiotic fix. It takes basically moving mountains to get it out. And a lot of that stuff is alternative medicine that is not covered by insurance, and it's expensive. So some people don't necessarily even have the option to really effectively treat themselves. But every year there's a bill that goes through. It passed our Senate unanimously this year. Now we're waiting for the House of Representatives to review it and see if it passes there. But this would then give doctors the ability to treat patients as they feel fit and to prescribe antibiotics for the duration that they think a person needs versus just the standard 28 days. And then it would also give insurance some onus in that they would have to cover treatment and also help to cover the cost of accurate diagnosing in the first place. Because like you say, there's a lot of people probably walking around that have it and don't realize it. And why I think that's such a concern is because for me, I felt like this was a gateway for other things to start to go wrong in my body. And I've talked to so many people who then develop cancer or other things. And I wonder, is it because their immune system was rendered incapable or less than ideal function levels, and then other opportunistic pathogens and things were able to really manifest themselves in unpleasant ways? And then it's just sad, because I think if we could get in front of the Lyme sooner, then a lot of those things probably wouldn't happen to people. And I've also been seeing a lot of research recently that says like 5 out of 5 patients that they look at with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and there was a third one, maybe MS. All of them had Lyme spirochetes in their body. And so that's also a little bit concerning, right? Like these other sicknesses that people have. We think of Christopherson. I always forget his name. I get him and Chris Smith, the two of them. I struggle with Chris Christopherson. He just had God, in my brain, maybe I've got it, Alzheimer's. And that's all it was. Then I think he got antibiotics and he got better again, you know? And so I think for other people, like, how many people have these other illnesses supposedly? And if they took some antibiotics and some other steps to treat the Lyme infection, wouldn't have these other problems.
Right.
So, you know, I do think about things from like a national security perspective. We would want our citizens to be as healthy as possible and to have our minds as sharp and functioning as brilliantly as we can, so that if times of emergency or things like this, we're able to be more effective. But if everyone's sick, like that's not serving us well either. Just even as a community, because there's people who are too sick to get out of bed. You experience that. Like there's people on very long term that are stuck in their bed that can't get out to go to work and pay for their bills, and you know they don't necessarily qualify for disability because doctors don't sometimes acknowledge like long-term Lyme exists, and it's just a mess. It's a very messy illness, unfortunately. So,
and you know, the funny story, when I had my 4-day stay in the hospital, and they're running all kinds of tests like heart tests, lung tests, there was a question whether or not they would have to tap my lung to get fluid out of it.
Oh man.
So the second day there, I'm Catholic, and so Catholics have a sacrament called the Last Rites.
Yes.
And now it's, well, anyway, so I grew up with, now it's called the Sacrament of the Sick, but 2 days into my hospital stay, a priest comes in and he goes, "Hey, I'm here to give you the Sacrament of the Sick." And I'm thinking, as a Catholic, I'm thinking, oh my God, am I dying here?
Oh, no.
So it was kind of like, okay, let's do it, Mr.
Oh,
Priest.
no. I was raised Catholic too, so I'm familiar with that. I didn't realize that they had changed it. I always thought it was the last rite too, but
Well, it originally, like, I think I'm older than you, but originally it was called this extreme unction was the Latin term, and then it became the last rites, and then it became sacrament of the sick. So now if you're Catholic and you see a priest, it doesn't necessarily mean you're dying.
Thank God.
But seeing the priest come in, yeah, I'm here. I'm just thinking the last rites.
I would have been right there with you. I'd probably be sweating bullets at that point, like, oh God, help me. Yes.
And I said, okay, this is good because there's 7 sacraments and now I've gotten all 6. I just need one more, and that's the holy orders. And I don't know if I'll be able to become a priest. So I got 6 out of 7.
Well, you're doing pretty good there.
Right. 6 or 7's not bad.
You're a lot further along with some of us.
Right.
That's a good.
Right.
And then one last question for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah. No.
Could you tell me, if, in your opinion, what would be the best thing that happened to you as a result of getting Lyme disease?
The best thing that happened. That's a tough one. The best thing that came out of it, well, I got to spend 4 days in the hospital, away from the world, away from my daily duties. I guess that was pretty nice. That's the only time I've ever been in a hospital to stay overnight.
May it be the only time you ever need to in the rest of your life as well.
Right, yes. But I can't think of... I
was thinking...
Well, other than I'll tell you, other than the only really outdoor activity I do is I go golfing. So there is sometimes where I could be walking in the woods after an errant shot, but I'm very careful now. I don't like to spend a lot of time in long brush or woods at all.
That's a good answer. I do my best not to spend any time there. But
Right.
if you're interested, you can put some permethrin on your golf shoes. You get permethrin at Dick's. It's a chemical, clearly. But if you spray that on your shoes, that'll give you 70 times prevention of them crawling up you at all. And it'll last for like 4 to 6 weeks at a minimum. I just retreat it kind of through maybe like once or twice through the season. But, they come from the ground up, so that will really help you. And obviously to wear your insect repellent while you're out there.
Boy, that's something I did not realize. They come from the ground up, because as a kid growing up and playing in the woods and all the time, I thought if you brushed against a branch, they would fall off the branch onto you. But now you're telling me, no, it's more like they're coming from the ground up.
Generally, that's where they're going to.
Okay.
Generally, that's where they'll come from. But what you're saying is true too. What we say is they're really going to be concentrated in the lower 5, like the bottom 5 feet of the environment, because they come out of the ground, like the grass, and then they'll crawl up onto long willowy things, branches, different things to position themselves at the edge so they can come onto things brush past.
Gotcha.
But more so they will come from the bottom up. But then I see things like birds or squirrels or different little critters that they attach to as well. And they fly above us, obviously. And I'm sure that some of them can fall off or come down from that way too. But when we think about, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask another question. I'm
Please
sorry.
do. This is good. No, I am grateful for this.
So talking about squirrels and just possums, foxes, creatures that live out there, do we know if they have developed some sort of immunity to Lyme disease?
That's a good question. So you actually talking about some important things though. I just want to say possums, for the record, eat up to 5,000 ticks a day. So they are our friend. They're really good for the environment, and they are a really good line of defense against killing some ticks, right? Or getting rid of some. Foxes are also really important because they eat the little rodents that the ticks feed on, that they contract the Lyme from, because that's how they get infected. Although now there's a whole other thing where ticks are starting to just be born with Lyme, which is bad, but typically they have to feed on like the white-footed mouse or a small rodent that has Lyme to get infected with it themselves. Then I've heard too, like cats supposedly don't really get Lyme. And I think to myself, well, that's interesting, because if we, the whole adage that cats like mice and mice carry the Lyme, so maybe somehow the cat has developed immunity towards it.
Right.
I'm not sure if there is specifically one set of animal that doesn't contract it. Because I feel like I have heard though that cats can get it, but they are much less likely. I don't know.
That leads me to another question.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of go out of my way not ever to kill any living thing, no matter what it is.
Yes, good.
But that's a moral dilemma for me. If I see a tick, I you know what I mean?
Sort of, yes. Although I see them as the creature of the devil.
Okay, so that one's okay. And do you have a way to get rid of a tick?
I mean, if you have it on your being, or are you just saying if you see one?
If you see one, because I've found a couple crawling up my legs that I've pulled off before they bit.
Good job.
So what do I do with that live tick?
Well, if you're really wanting to do something potentially beneficial with it, you could put it into a Ziploc baggie and mail it in to get tested. That lab that I was talking about is in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, and they do a lot of research on ticks. And so they'll track, they'll make note of where it came from, the sicknesses that it potentially had. That all goes into a database to help us learn more about ticks. And that's ticklab.org. Yeah, if you want to do that, it's ticklab.org is their website, and then you can send it to them for free. Basically, they'll just again catalog it. If you want to do something a little bit more malicious, you can burn them, or just like I'd say, just don't throw it in the trash can, because the poor trash man has to then potentially come in contact with it.
Yeah. Right.
Whatever you do, like tape it closed, and I encase it in tape, like wrap it to death. But even that lady that does the research at East Stroudsburg, she said she put 2 or 3 ticks into a freezer that went down to like -100 degrees or some really drastically cold temperature. She expected them to die. When she pulled them out 48 hours later, they started crawling around again. They don't die.
Oh my goodness.
Like they just don't die. So you're really, I think your best bet is to send them into the lab.
Yeah, no, I didn't. That's a good idea. If I would certainly do that.
Yeah, thank you for asking. And there is an actual app too, that the tick tracker app that you can go on and put in the information too,
Okay.
that where you saw it or where you found it, because that's just another way for
Oh.
them to track their movement.
Okay, good. I will do that.
Those are very good questions, so thank you for asking. Things I don't necessarily think to tell people, you know, to have other
Well,
questions.
that's
This has been good.
so, yeah, that's my Lyme disease story.
Well, again, I really appreciate you sharing it and willingness to talk about it and letting us see another perspective on what happens with people with Lyme disease. And also for your really good, candid questions. I appreciate that as well, because that'll just help people learn more in keeping them safe. And that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah. Well, I didn't get a call from any of the late night talk shows to come on and tell my Lyme disease story. Just you.
Well, one day maybe I will be like them, and then you'll be like, you remember when I went on that famous girl show?
Right. It wouldn't surprise me.
I'll be okay with it. And even if it's just this and us, I'm more than happy to do it, because if we can just help one other person learn about this and keep their families safe and avoid it in the first place, again, we have done a miracle to our fellow human population. So
And you're writing a book, right?
yes, and I'm really
Okay.
excited about that too, because I thought at first I wanted to do like just to put I think I might actually do two different versions out of this whole experience. Like one version to just put people's stories, basically like how we're talking through them in a book. But then also I see so many common themes from us that have experienced it, that I think that could also help people, and to say, these are some of the different common themes I've seen from people in healing, and maybe these things could apply to you to help you as well.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess whenever it comes out, I guess I'll see that you'll post it or something on Facebook and tell us where we can
Send you
get
a
it.
copy. Are you kidding? I want to send a copy to all of my participants. That's the least I can do for you, for helping me.
No, that's fine.
I'm serious. I like, like, hopefully you'll like it when it comes, because you're getting
I'm
one.
sure I will.
That's the one thing I'll ask you later, is to please send me your mailing address.
Okay.
Yeah. But again, thank
All
you.
right.
And I appreciate you
All right.
connecting with me and spending some time together and sharing what you have and your knowledge. It's been very important to get out there.
All right. I hope I was helpful.
Incredibly. Thank you very, very much.
All right. Thank you, Ann, for listening to my story.
My pleasure.
All right.
Thank you. I will talk with you soon. Let's have a great afternoon.
All right. See you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.